I was just turning around. I'm lost. The driver, Declan, sounded rehearsed. You're on a dead-end street that leads to a swamp, Declan. Nobody gets lost here. They come here to hide or to drop something off. Now look, I see your passenger left the door open. Did he run into the bushes? No one else was in the car, sir. I swear. Eli knelt down and peered under the dashboard, then back at the footwell. He picked up the laminated card. It was a fake ID, but expertly made. Declan, your passenger has left you in a bit of a predicament, Eli said, holding up the card. This ID belongs to a man named Theodore Karras. Ted Karras is 65 years old and lives in Buffalo, New York. You, Declan, are clearly not 65, nor are you in Buffalo. You are currently providing excellent cover for your partner, who I suspect just bolted into the mangrove. Bush lowered his weapon slightly. Shots fired. Negative, Eli confirmed. The passenger is on foot. We need to secure Declan. Officer Bush, cuff him. Officer Correa, run a perimeter check. I'll take point. The passenger, the real runner, was likely the one carrying the payload, the identity documents, the hard cash, or the high-grade product. And he was likely a member of the conch crew, perhaps even the leader. As Bush secured Declan, who immediately dissolved into a pathetic stream of denials and sobs, Eli looked toward the dense, suffocating mangroves. The terrain was hellish, sharp oyster shells, knee-deep mud, and a labyrinth of roots. Correa, be advised, Eli said, grabbing the confiscated tablet and a pair of latex gloves from his jacket. The runner is probably carrying a duffel bag likely containing a sophisticated credit card cloning setup and a few pounds of a designer stimulant. He's running for the water, probably a small boat waiting. But he's running blind in there. This isn't his element. He's a city boy who thought a swamp was a better escape route than a parking garage. Eli turned back to Declan, who was now weeping into the hood of the cruiser. Declan, listen to me, Eli said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Your partner, Ted, he left you. He's willing to sacrifice you to the local fauna just to save his own skin. That's not loyalty, that's bad management. Now, if you want to help us find him before a gator finds him, you need to talk. Declan shook his head tears, mixing with sweat. He's got a gun. He told me if I talked, he'd kill my mother. Eli raised an eyebrow, the first genuine surprise of the day flickering across his face. A gun. Okay, now we have a complication and a potential hostage scenario, albeit a very distant one. He looked back at the mangroves, then at the tablet in his hand. The screen was still active. A single large red icon dominated the display, a small stylized conch shell. Sergeant Benson, this is Thorne. Eli spoke into the radio, his focus now absolute. We have an active runner armed heading into the mangroves at 132 and Bush. Suspect is part of the conch crew operation, requesting air support and a rapid K9 unit. This is gonna be a long night, Sergeant. Better bring me a proper coffee, not that instant stuff. My criminal psychology relies heavily on adequate caffeine. The pursuit into the mangroves was a comedy of errors for everyone except the runner. Eli, the cerebral profiler in the ill-fitting suit, found himself immediately caked in thick black mud. Correa, whose uniform was immaculate just minutes prior, slipped on a root and let out a string of curses that would have made a sailor blush. Officer Bush, despite his bulk, was surprisingly agile navigating the routes with practiced ease, but his attempts to use his flashlight were mostly useless in the dense foliage. This is an excellent example of the geographic determinism of crime, Eli grunted, pulling his foot out of a mud pit with a sickening slurp. A proper criminal would have used a boat, not his feet. This shows a catastrophic failure in contingency planning, indicating a high reliance on immediate, high-reward, low-risk schemes. Textbook narcissistic opportunist. He's an opportunist with a gun, Detective Correa hissed, struggling to keep her balance. And I think I just stepped on a snake. The runner, Theodore Karras, or whoever he truly was, had a small lead, but he was creating an obvious trail. Snapped branches, displaced mud, and strangely, a trail of shredded dollar bill. He's dumping cash, Eli observed, picking up a muddy $100 bill. Panic setting in. He's prioritizing mobility over assets. He believes the bag is heavier than the money is worth, which means the bag contains something critical, likely the hardware, not the product. The product can be replaced. The ID matrix cannot. They followed the trail for 20 agonizing minutes, the air thick with humidity and the metallic scent of low tide. Then they found the duffel bag. It was wedged between two roots, hastily covered with a handful of leaves. Jackpot, Eli whispered. Correa covered him as Eli, maintaining his distance, used a long branch to carefully open the bag. Inside, nestled among complex wiring and a handful of burner phones, was the object of the runner's desperation: a sleek, compact, fully operational credit card embossing and cloning machine, and a single small plastic-wrapped brick of white powder, the high-grade narcotic. But the bag was empty of a gun, and empty of the runner. He ditched the equipment, Detective Bush noted, catching up. He's faster without the weight. No, Eli corrected, pointing to a small, almost invisible scuff mark on a route leading toward the main channel. He ditched the evidence, he kept the gun, and he made the critical error of changing his trajectory after the dump. Eli pointed toward the sound of a distant sputtering engine. He's made it to the boat. Damn it, he's gone. Back at the precinct, the analysis of the Conch crew's beach operations began in earnest. The captured suspect, Declan, was a low-level mule, terrified and useless. The recovered equipment was a gold mine linking the Falardo operation directly to the Miami case. But the runner, the key player, the one who escaped, was still out there. Eli sat in the temporary office, staring at the alchemist's recovered cart, which the police had impounded. It was a masterpiece of absurdity, brightly painted, rickety, and utterly covered in the sickly sweet scent of the tidal wave of tomorrow. The alchemist, the observer, the one who gave the telltale signal. He wasn't just a random drunk. He was the eyes and ears the beach lookout. Eli found a small hidden compartment in the cart's base. It contained no drugs or money, just a single folded piece of paper. It wasn't a list of recipes or transactions. It was a note written in cramped, elegant handwriting. Key West. The Rock is watching. Eli leaned back, rubbing his temples. The Conch crew was moving its center of operations, and the key was a 4-hour drive south to the land of eternal sunshine, six-toed cats, and street performers who thought they were cinematic boxers. The Rock Eli mused, a faint smile playing on his lips. Not the WWE guy, but the actual island. And I bet I know who the lookout is down there. He looked at the map. Key West, the farthest south you could go without falling into the ocean. The land of perpetual vacation where the line between tourist and fugitive was impossibly blurred. The perfect place to disappear. All right, Sergeant Eli said, grabbing his now mud-caked briefcase. I'm taking the next flight to the Keys. We're going from low-grade beach chaos to high-end southernmost point absurdity. We need to find a street performer, a moped, and possibly a tiny dog in an Italian stallion sweatshirt. Key West at night was a different kind of chaos than Falardo Beach. Here, the energy wasn't desperate. It was committed. Duval Street was a river of revelers, tourists, and the deeply strange Eli, having traded his muddy suit for a slightly less wrinkled linen shirt and jeans, felt immediately out of place, too sober, too observant, too focused. He was looking for the Rock the Key West lookout. The note had been deliberately cryptic, but Eli's profiling background suggested a common trait among these small, insular criminal operations. They employed familiar faces and familiar covers. The police provided him with a patrol contact officer, Danny Flynn, a Key West local with a reputation for dealing with the absurd with a weary New England deadpan. Flynn met Eli at a quiet cafe sipping iced tea with the solemnity of a man contemplating a difficult chess move. Detective Thorne, welcome to the asylum, Flynn said, nodding at the passing parade of costumed tourists. I hear you're chasing a white-collar, credit card cloning, drug-peddling perp who thinks he's a mangrove specialist. He thinks he's an escapist officer. He's a classic flight risk narcissist who views his surroundings as props for his own brilliance. He ran to the one place in the country where everyone's in costume and no one asks questions, Eli explained, taking a large, grateful gulp of coffee. The tip led me to the Rock. The lookout. I'm guessing it's a person, not a place, given the context. Flynn chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. In Key West, the Rock is a guy, or a performance, or sometimes both. Let me run you through the usual suspects. Flynn pulled out a small notepad. We have Captain Crunch, who sells questionable jewelry. We have the guy who plays the spoons on his knees. And then we have Rocky Balboa. The one and only, drives a moped, wears the whole getup. He's harmless and eccentric. Eli's internal alarm bells began to chime like a broken carousel. Rocky Balboa? You mean Rocky Balboa. No, he insists on Balboa. Says it's his stage name. Came down here years ago, did a comedy set, got a street performer permit, and never left. He's obsessed with the Key West Marathon and motivational quotes. Utterly non-criminal. Perfect, Eli said, his eyes lighting up. The non-criminal is always the criminal. It's the highest form of camouflage. Tell me about his routine. Flynn sighed, adjusting his hat. He rides up and down Duval on a tiny little moped, the one in the report. A rinky-dink thing with the Rocky music blaring. He waves, runs up the steps of the courthouse, and then drives off, usually doing a little shuffle. Harmless, except for the traffic hazard. The moped, the music, the specific character Eli murmured, connecting the dots back to the Falardo alchemist's use of novelty. It's a signal. The music is the cue. The route is the patrol. He's not a performer, Officer Flynn. He's a living, breathing surveillance system. Before they could plan their next move, Flynn's radio crackled to life, echoing the absurdity of the Key West police scanner. 132 inches Bush again. Correction, I've got a Rocky Balboa on a moped failure to stop, heading south on Duval. Looks like he's trying to punch out. Flynn looked at Eli, a look of profound resignation on his face. You can't make this stuff up, detective. You fly 1,000 miles to escape the spring break chaos, and you find a boxing character on a tiny Italian scooter being pulled over for a traffic violation. The conch crew is getting desperate, Eli said, standing up. They know we're closing in, and they're using their lookout in an unscheduled, panic-induced signal. Let's go. I want to see what Rocky Balboa is hiding behind his eye of the Tiger routine. The spectacle that followed was truly Key West. Officer Bush, the very same officer from the Mangrove stop who had flown down to assist in the Key West sweep, had indeed pulled over the motorized icon. Rocky Balboa, a man in a gray sweatsuit with a perpetually optimistic but slightly sweaty face, was perched precariously on a tiny sputtering, moped speakers blaring the orchestral swell of Gonna Fly Now. Bush's expression, unreadable, stood by his cruiser. All right, Rocky, I'm not gonna give you any tickets tonight, okay, but I need you to drive safe for me so nobody gets hurt. All right, okay, have a good night. Drive safe. Thanks. The raw footage confirmed it a verbal warning. The officer was letting him go. Eli and Flynn pulled up. Eli was immediately exasperated. Officer Bush, why did you let him go? He's the lookout. We had him. Eli demanded, rushing over. Bush, a man of few words, shrugged. He was weaving a little, not wearing a helmet. Just trying to entertain these people. I mean, that's all it is. No problem with that. But just like I said, you've got to be safe, okay? Only in Key West, you can't make this stuff up. Eli stared at the retreating figure of Rocky Balboa, who was now accelerating his moped down the street, raising his fists in a victory salute. The conch crew isn't just dealing drugs and cloning cards, Eli muttered, pulling out his notebook. They're dealing in psychological warfare. They're weaponizing irony. They know we can't arrest an iconic local for driving a moped without a helmet if we want to maintain community relations. It's a genius move. Flynn pointed down an alleyway. Well, Rocky's gone. But look what he left behind. A small nondescript cooler sat abandoned near a dumpster, precisely where the Rocky theme music had reached its crescendo before the stop. It was the same brand as the rental cooler Eli had seen the alchemist signal toward. Eli approached the cooler cautiously. This wasn't a signal. This was a drop. An unscheduled emergency drop triggered by Bush's routine stop. Bush, you're a genius, Eli said, a rare note of genuine admiration in his voice. You didn't just give him a warning. You forced the drop without a chase. You're a tactical savant disguised as a traffic cop. Bush merely shrugged again. Just told him to drive safe. Eli opened the cooler. Inside, nestled amongst ice and a few bottles of non-alcoholic sports drinks, was a waterproof plastic pouch containing several stacks of brand new, expertly cloned credit cards and a set of instructions for the next phase of Operation A Shift to the High-End Tourist Hotels. The instructions were signed not by Declan or Theodore Karras, but by a single initial V. V, Eli said, pocketing the evidence, the mastermind. And Rocky Balboa is his unwitting, or perhaps very witting, pawn. The capture of the conch crew was moving into its final, most complex phase. The trail led from the chaotic freedom of spring break beaches to the absurd theatricality of Key West, all under the watchful, yet strangely charming gaze of a boxing enthusiast on a moped. The psychological profile of V was starting to take shape: high risk, high reward, deeply cynical, and with a pronounced sense of the theatrical. A man who understood that in the age of instant media, the best crime was the one that looked like a joke. But Eli knew one thing for certain: the joke was about to end. The pursuit of V would require more than procedure. It would require stepping into the surreal world the criminal had created and playing the role of the sober analytical foil. The stage was set, and the final act of the Key West conundrum was about to begin.